1. Okay, to start, this started about 6 years back, in 2010, when my mom first moved to Florida. She moved into a really bad trailer park in Central Florida, since she didn't have much money. So after about 5 months of her living there, I decided to move in with her. I was 12 at the time. The house was rather nice, and I liked it, but I hated the neighborhood. So about a month later, she introduces me to her boyfriend, and he was your typical racist white trash country boy who lived across the street. We'll call him Ed. When I first met him, he was rather nice, and I liked him for the next 6 months. I did a ton of new things with him, like ride ATVs and go fishing. But he then started to become a really big asshole. He never did anything. He yelled at my mom constantly. Then this one night, I was at my house, and my mom was at his house, and she was doing dishes. And they get into a really big argument. And when my mom was done, her engagement ring that my dad gave her 8 years back fell off and slid behind the fridge. She went to get it, and when she got her hands back there, Ed slammed the fridge and it smashed her hands, not breaking them. Now, my mom, having lived in Philly for 30 years, punched him in the face, and he did the same, and the cops were called, and they both got arrested, even though it was entirely self-defense. And I stayed at our neighbor for 3 days. So she got out, and he got 2 weeks. And when he got out, everything was back to normal, with her staying there again. So he moves to a really secluded lot he had. His trailer moved, and all was well. Then our house got invaded by fleas, like thousands, so we moved in with him to stop getting bit. They always fought and yelled, but I got used to it. Then one day my mom picked me up from school and told me that she had gotten a Kindle from my brother who was deployed in Afghanistan at the time, and she loved it since it was a gift from him. Then we got to Ed's house, and he is in his bedroom watching porn, with the volume real loud. Now, my mom, being a good parent, goes in there and tells him to turn it down. And he turns it up, so she unplugs it and he starts yelling at her. So my mom, not wanting to yell, comes to the living room with me and turns on music on the Kindle. Now, we were ready to move out, as in we had all our stuff in the car, and that was our last day there. He comes out yelling and turns off the power to the whole house. So my mom went in there yelling, and when she was coming out, she hit a $1 painting and it broke. Now he flips out over this and starts yelling, so my mom decides to leave. When we were getting everything else, Ed comes outside, gets into his truck, and slams into her Mustang. He then gets out, grabs the Kindle that is in my hands, and slams it to the pavement. So my mom went inside and grabbed a knife and stabbed him in the gut. She then called the police and didn't get arrested because he was actually wanted for a lot of robberies on small stores also. This was about 3 months after he got arrested the first time. So everything went back to normal. We got a new house. Also, he survived, but didn't mess with us again. 2. I am a 27-year-old female, and this story occurred when I was 19. A little information before I get to the story. I used to live with 3 other roommates, Nick, Greg, and Alyssa. This house was quite literally in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by woods, and the neighbors were about a 10-minute drive to get to. Alyssa's father owned a home and allowed us to rent the house while he was trying to sell it. We got a steep discount on rent in exchange for keeping up with the maintenance. I owned a pit bull at the time, and quite possibly the friendliest one at that. He would seriously lick you to death and never showed signs of aggression. Ever. The layout of the house was basically a rectangle in shape. At one end of the house was Alyssa's room, the master, and beside it, stairs that led down to the basement, which had a door to the outside. The middle portion was the living room, which had a floor-to-ceiling windows on both sides of it. Then came the hallway, which housed the room that Nick and I split. At the other end of the house was the kitchen and dining room, and Greg's room was right off the kitchen next to the back door. I hope this gives you a decent visual of the house. Now on with the story. One evening I ended up in the house alone. This was a rare event since there is almost always at least 2 of us at home at any given moment. I was in the living room watching television when I started to get that feeling like someone was watching me. I ignored it and assumed I was freaking myself since it was dark outside and I was home alone. The feeling persisted, so I decided to let the dog in the house to keep me company. Alyssa never allows the dog in the house since he could scratch up the wood floors. I continued watching TV while my dog started roaming around, excited to be inside. He had calmed down and started to circle an area on the floor to lay down on. Suddenly, I heard a noise coming from the basement area. It sounded similar to someone shuffling items on a store shelf. We had a large bookshelf in the basement that was standing against one of the walls. We used this to hold all the typical basement items, such as boxes of old junk, various tools, paint, and other little items. I was petrified with fear because no one was supposed to be home at that hour. And they definitely wouldn't come in through the basement. The dogs normally bark at any little thing they hear, but they were snoring away on the floor. I convinced myself that my mind was messing with me and I needed to calm down. After all, it was an older home and probably had its own quirks. And I probably never noticed before because I had never been in the house without other people chatting away. I called my dog to come up and lay on the couch with me to ease my paranoia. A short time later, he stood up on the couch, ears stiffly pointed up, facing the stairwell to the basement, listening intently and turning his head from side to side, slightly as if he were trying to tune in to the noise. I muted the television to see if I could hear anything myself, and it was completely silent. I shook my head and began to raise the remote back up to unmute it, when my dog began to snarl, crouching down onto his footpaws with the hair between his shoulder blades raised. I have never seen him react to anyone or anything like this. I started to get extremely nervous, and my heart was beating so hard I thought I was going to burst out of my chest. He started to slowly walk backwards, crawling on top of me while continuing to face the staircase. I still couldn't hear a single noise, but I was certain someone was down there. I mean, why else would he act like this? He remained growling for a few minutes, then eased up and went back to resting at my feet on the couch. It took me probably 10 minutes of staring at the stairs to muster up the courage to go see if anyone was down there. I slowly approached the top of the stairs and looked down into the basement. Nothing. I walked further down, dog right behind me, and I prayed I didn't run into an intruder. Nothing. No one was there. I checked the locks on the door, and they were all still in the locked position. I figured that an animal had been messing with the trash cans outside or something, and my dog had heard it. But I couldn't get over the fact that the one reacted so angrily when he is normally a lover and not a fighter. Skip forward 2 weeks. I'm in bed but having a difficult time sleeping. All of my roommates are also sleeping, which is hard to deny when their snoring is echoing through the house. I keep waking up every 10 minutes or so, and roll from one side to the other every time I do. Around 1 in the morning, I wake up and just can't get back to sleep. I stare blankly out of my bedroom door, kind of daydreaming, hoping I will fall asleep soon since I have to be up for work at 5 in the morning. As I'm spacing out, I see a black silhouette cross my bedroom door in the hallway. It was traveling from the kitchen side to the living room, so I assumed it was Greg. However, both Greg and Alyssa are extremely heavy-footed, and you can hear both of them walking wherever they are in the house. This person was silent, completely silent. I called out to him, "Greg?" No response. I called louder, "Greg!" Still nothing. I figured he was sleepwalking, and decided to get up and make sure he was okay. I entered the hallway and turned towards the living room. It was pitch black and I could hardly see a thing. but strained my eyes trying to pinpoint what should be the only moving thing in the living room. No one was there. I thought maybe he turned around when I wasn't looking, so I slowly made my way back towards his room. The closer I got, the more clearly I would hear him snoring away. I opened his door, and he was completely out in his bed. Chills went through me. I thought of the event with the basement just weeks before and wondered, what if someone is in the house? What if he tries to kill us? So many morbid thoughts were circling my brain. I woke both Greg and Nick up. I told them what I saw, and they immediately turned on all of the lights, searched the home. They couldn't find anyone. Aside from us, the house was empty. They went outside and circled the perimeter of the house, checking for any signs that someone had been creeping around. They couldn't find anyone, or anything to validate what I had seen. I tried to convince myself that I had imagined it, but I knew in my gut that I had saw someone, or something. A few days later, we were all hanging out in the dining room, playing cards and drinking a little, celebrating the fact that we all had the next day off work. It was getting late into the night, and we were all pretty tipsy. We heard my dog losing his mind out on the front porch, which he normally only does when someone is driving up to the house, so we decided to go investigate. All of the chairs that were previously on the deck had been seemingly tossed into the yard. The dogs were standing on the porch, barking towards the area where the chairs were. Alyssa laughed a little and stated, "Guess the ghost isn't happy we didn't invite him to the party." I looked at her confused and asked, "What ghost?" Alyssa proceeded to tell us that her family moved into the house when she was in her early teen years, and some weird shit happened all the time, like cabinets being opened and closed, furniture being moved, and weird noises at night. She owned a large dresser that had a mirror resting on top of it. She said that one day she had bent down to get something out of one of the drawers, and when she stood up, she saw a man hanging from the ceiling in the mirror. She turned around and he was gone. She told us that when her dad began doing work on the home, he had discovered some pentagrams painted on the floor underneath the carpeting, along with some other weird symbols. He had also discovered an area in the woods by the home that had a small clearing, and all the trees around it had these same symbols. As she went on with her story, I stood there thinking, why the fuck didn't you tell me this before I moved in? I am a firm believer in the paranormal, and I'm also a firm believer in the fact that you should never dabble in the occult. Messing around with the darker side of the paranormal only results in some bad shit happening, and I do not want to be involved with anything tied to it. I was too horrified about my experiences, as well as Alyssa's stories, to stay in that house. As soon as I found another place to live, I moved out in a single day and never went back. It took me a little while to feel comfortable in my new home because I was paranoid that I would have brought some bad juju with me from that satanic house. I know, I sound like a total lunatic, but once you've experienced something that scares you in a way that nothing else can, it tends to unleash a little bit of crazy you never knew you had. The house has since been sold, and I feel sorry for the poor souls that now have to live there. 3. Shortly after I turned 18, I got a job at a local movie rental place to help pay for my college. I worked there for about 2 years, and during that time, I'd been promoted to hold keys to the store and open and close the registers. This also meant that I was occasionally working by myself for short periods of time. One such morning, I was going through the morning procedures and putting returned movies back on the shelves. I was accustomed to greeting every customer, no matter what. Not only as a friendly gesture, but as a part of the loss prevention protocol. If a customer knows that you know that they are there, they are less likely to try to steal something. Yeah, right. Anyway, this particular morning, I was taking the movie cart around and shelving the movies, and I heard the door ding on the other side of the store. So I greet whoever it is with my voice raised. "Hi, how are you today?" Normally, they would give a reply back, but I didn't get one this time. So I'm looking between the shelves for the person that came in, and I see a middle-aged, balding man looking around. He seemed normal at first, but he didn't really say anything when I asked him the next 2 times if he needed help. He pretty much ignored me. So I went about my business while keeping an eye on him. He was starting to make me nervous because he wasn't really looking at anything, just kind of making it look like he was looking at what was in front of him when his attention was focused elsewhere, seemingly at the ceiling. So I decided to give it one more try and let him know that I'm wondering what he's doing. "Can I help you find anything?" I asked as I walked past him to put a movie away. At this point he'd been in the store nearly 20 minutes. He responded in such a way that made it clear that there was something off in his mind. Facing me, but just his eyes averted from my face, he says in a startling, loud, drawling voice, "Oh, you know, just browsing." So I politely said, "Okay, just let me know if I can help you with anything," and went about my duties. He left shortly after this, at which point I let out a sigh of relief. A few days went by, and I was opening by myself again. I went to start shelving the movies when the door dinged. And I again turned to greet whoever it was when I saw the same guy beelining it straight at me. I kind of panicked a little, but stood my ground, and when he got right up to me, seriously so close, I leaned back away from him. He lifted an open can of nuts and offered, "Cashew?" No thank you," I said. I asked if I could help him find anything, and he didn't answer. And he went to the start of the wall where the movies that started with A were located, which was just a few feet to the left of where I was putting up the B or C movies. He was very obviously pretending to look at movie boxes by picking them up and flipping them over, then putting them back. He continued this and shuffled along behind me as I moved down the wall. After a few minutes of this, I got uncomfortable and took the cart to the front counter, at which point he leaves the store. A few customers came and went, and I went back to shelving the movies. When I was around the M area of the movie wall, Cashew Guy came back and continued his pretend perusal of the movie boxes, always just a few feet to the left of me. So in the next area of the store, there were shelves that went a bit higher than the rest, and on the very top shelf, there were softcore porn movies. There was also a back room that contained the hard stuff. But I only went in that room one time, right before I quit, just to see what it was like. Anyway, I was shelving the movies with Cashew Guy near me, not saying anything to me until I got to the softcore section. He reaches for one of the boxes at the top, which makes me shudder, and says to me in his loud, strange voice, "I bet you have one of those big football player boyfriends." Thoroughly creeped out and disgusted, I go straight to the front counter and another male customer walks in. This guy finds what he's looking for and goes to the register. I whisper to this guy that there is a man bothering me and asked if he would stay until the guy leaves. He shrugged and just kind of stood by the door awkwardly until Cashew Guy walked out. I thanked the guy and he left, and I went back to the shelves, and not 5 minutes later, Cashew Guy comes back and again tried to engage me in awkward conversation. I went to the front counter and called my mom. She and my sister were out getting lunch, so I told her what was going on, and they brought me something to eat. As soon as I picked up the phone, he left the store. He didn't come back that day. Next door to the movie place was an electronics store that was run by a very nice and talkative man, Mr. Moon, and his wife. I never spoke to his wife, but I knew English wasn't their first language. Mr. Moon would come over and use our shrink-wrap machine, and talk and make us laugh. One evening after my encounter with the strange man, Mr. Moon came in more serious than normal, and warned us about a man that had come in while his wife was working alone, and he was out getting food. The man was walking around, picking things up, putting them back down in such a way that made Mrs. Moon uncomfortable. After a while, Mrs. Moon asked if he was going to purchase something, and he picked up a random house phone and asked how much it was. She told him, and he got upset at the price. He took it to the counter anyway, and when she rang him up, he tried to pay with a crumpled up check from his pocket. She refused to accept the check, and he got angry. So she called Mr. Moon to come back and handle the situation. Mr. Moon told the man that the check was suspicious, and they normally wouldn't accept it as payment. Mr. Moon understood that there was something off with this guy, and agreed to accept the check on a condition that the man gave a phone number where he could be reached. He told him that if the check bounced, he was going to call him, and the man would have to cover the cost of it all. The man agreed, but Mr. Moon knew it was a bad deal all the way around. He said after the man left the store, he went and stood in the parking lot and just stared up at the sky for about 10 minutes. I figured by his description that it was the same man that had been bothering me. One day not long after the move, I got to the movie store to pick up my paycheck, and the girl working tells me some man came in asking about me. She said he seemed off, and she said she knew he was talking about me when he referenced my curly hair. It gave me the creeps, but I personally never saw the guy again. I found out why when a few days later Mr. Moon came in, saying that unsurprisingly the check the man had paid with bounced. He called the number. The man gave him a few times and talked to the man on the phone, each time getting nowhere in the conversation. Mr. Moon did a pretty good impersonation of the startlingly loud, drawling voice. "Oh yeah, okay." Anyway, he called one more time and a woman answered. When Mr. Moon explained the situation, the woman said, "I'm his mother, he's not here anymore. I had him committed and the hospital picked him up this morning." 4. To start off, I am an 18-year-old male, I live in New Zealand, and this happened a year ago. I have had sleep paralysis before, and have heard things but never seen anything while in this state. It is always a frightening experience. The experiences I am about to share with you are the ones when I am unsure if I really was asleep. One night as I drifted off to sleep, I heard a girl right outside my window whisper my name. My instant thought was, it's not real. It's just sleep paralysis, it'll pass. But I quickly realized I wasn't paralyzed. I was awake and could move, so the voice could not have been in my head. But stupid me told myself it was, and tried going back to sleep. Almost instantly, I heard this girl say my name again, but she sounded a lot closer, like in my bed closer. Just then, my dog sprinted to the front door as if someone was here. This sent chills down my spine. I shot up, picked up my belt and wrapped it around my hand so that the buckle was on my fist, ready to knock the fuck out whoever was playing this sick joke. I made my way to the front door, cautious but fast because I am scared of the paranormal and I just really needed to see that there was a living person fucking with me and not some spirit. As I got to the door, my dog was sitting there, wagging her tail really excited. She's the kind of dog that is constantly happy. I opened the door. Nothing. Walk outside and let out a loud and violent, "Hey!" Still nothing. I go back inside, turn off all the lights, so that if there was someone out there, it would make it harder for them to see me. Once my eyes adjust, I take my dog and head out to the backyard, still having the belt around my fist, literally searching every inch of my backyard. I found nothing to suggest anyone had been outside my house at all. Again, I have a great fear of the paranormal, so I was trying my hardest to block the thought of this being a ghost out of my head, finally deciding that whoever it was now long gone. I head inside, get into bed, making sure to keep my belt close by. I gestured my dog onto the bed, and I lay down to drift off, which was a bad idea. No windows were open. The house was locked up, but I swear I felt the coldest chill on my neck. as if someone was breathing on me. I only ever heard her voice once after this incident. We had moved house by this time, and I was staying in a downstairs bedroom, but this time I was paralyzed in sleep, or was I, because I blinked and was able to move almost instantly afterwards. All I heard was my name being said in the eerie, familiar voice. 5. I have never before written my stories down, and since English isn't my first language, I'm hoping you will understand there are probably going to be a lot of mistakes. Just to clarify, this story is being sent to Hellfreezer and no one else. So, I'm a 25-year-old girl from Sweden, living on my own these past 6 years. I've always been interested in the paranormal and had lots of encounters and so on throughout my life. Finding one story to send isn't easy since I would like for it to be a scary story, but I don't really find any of them scary. But I've decided to tell the story about a ghostly encounter I had while studying in university and living in a small cottage that students could rent over the year, but was just for tourists during summertime. The cottage was small and had an open plan solution. When you walked in, there was a small hallway with a toilet straight ahead, and to your right was a doorway to the kitchen. Beside the kitchen was a small living room, bedroom, meaning half of the room was the bedroom, and in the end of the room was a sofa. Lying in bed, you could see the sofa and the kitchen. I lived there all by myself, always locking the door and pulling down the blinds on every window, since the cottage was surrounded by other cottages. My encounters started off slow. I would wake up in the middle of the night in panic, since I could feel that someone was inside the cottage with me. I would look around the cottage from my bed, but I couldn't see anything or anyone. Since I was so scared, I always turned on the lamp as soon as I had looked around the room. With the lights on, the feeling of not being alone would disappear, and I could sense that I was all by myself again. This happened a few times, me waking up in the middle of the night, terrified since someone was with me in the cottage, and me turning on the lights and chasing whatever it was out. I started getting used to it, and I knew it wasn't my imagination, since I've never had this problem before, or since I moved out of that cottage. One night was different. I woke up in panic thinking I wasn't alone, and while looking around the apartment, I could see a black figure sitting on the sofa. It looked like a person, but before I could watch the figure, I had turned on the lamp, and the figure was gone. I was scared, but just went back to sleep. I have never had any problems falling asleep after these kind of things. These incidents happened a couple of times. Me waking up, seeing this black figure sitting on the sofa, and disappearing when I turned on the lights. And me getting more and more frustrated that I always turned on the goddamn lamp before thinking about it. And therefore nothing new ever happened. One night these incidents changed once more. I was dreaming, and saw an old man in the small window behind the sofa, facing the bed. He was old and held this old lantern in his hand while peeking in at me, the lantern making a yellow light around him and in through my window. I rose from my bed, awake, seeing a black shadow outside of the window, and turned on the lamp. It was once again gone. After that incident, I only had one more. I was sleeping, and once again I could see the same old man sitting beside me, beside the bed, staring down on me where I laid. The old man had this disturbing grin on his face, when all of a sudden, he was coming towards me and trying to grab me. In fear, I sat up and, fast like lightning, I turned on the lights and the man slowly disappeared. It was kind of creepy. This incident was the last one in that cottage. I moved out after that. Not because of this old man, but because it was summertime, and sadly, I didn't get the same cottage again. The fascinating thing about these incidents was that it aggravated over time. I never had an experience like this before, and I'm still curious what the old man wanted to do or say to me. I learned 3 things by this. 1. Don't talk about things like this to my father. except unless you want to be called psychotic, and that something is probably wrong inside your head. And 2, try not to turn on the lights. The fun will end if you do. 3, I apparently have superpowers since I can find a light switch in no time at all in the dark. Hey everyone, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Subscriber Stories, episode 23. I want to say thank you very much to everyone who sent their stories in this week, and also to assure you that if you have sent me a story in and I haven't gotten to it yet, I will get to it at some point, I promise you. If you yourself have a story you would like to share, then please do click where it says show more below the video. Scroll down to the bottom and you'll find my email address at the very bottom, and that's the email address for stories. Thanks in advance. I'd also like to say a big thanks for all the great feedback I'm getting on my latest 30 Stories video. It's very much appreciated. Thanks to all of those of you who have watched it and left feedback, and to those of you who have shared the video around. That is greatly appreciated as well. So thank you for doing that, and please do continue to do so, because that is very helpful for me. Right, I've got less than 4 hours before the workmen come and start hammering and banging away above my head. That's not as sexy as it sounds, so I'm going to head off and try and get a wee bit of rest and relaxation done before they arrive. Okay, so until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.